Your neighbor just retired. Decent guy, worked the same job for 32 years. From the outside, it looks like he made it. But here's what nobody sees. He's exhausted in a way that started years before he stopped working. And if you're in your late 50s or early 60s still clocking in, what's coming will hit you harder than you think. Here's the truth about working in your 60s that nobody says out loud. The first thing that changes is your energy. Not dramatically, not all at once. That's what makes it so dangerous. It doesn't announce itself. It just quietly recalibrates what a normal day feels like. A standard 8-hour shift that you ran on autopilot at 42 now takes something from you by 3 p.m. You can still do the job, that's not the issue. The issue is the recovery time. At 35, you worked a long week and bounced back over the weekend. At 62, the weekend isn't always enough. You carry it into Monday, then Tuesday. And because the decline is gradual, you spend months telling yourself you're just tired, just stressed, just having a rough stretch. You're not. Your body is sending you a message, and the message is that the math of your time and energy is changing whether you plan for it or not. Here's what makes this financially dangerous. Most people build their retirement timeline around a number, not around how they'll physically feel when they're supposed to hit that number. They say, I'll work until 67. I'll work until I hit $800,000. I'll work until Medicare kicks in. But they never factor in that their capacity to keep executing at the same level is not a straight line. It bends, and it bends earlier than you expect. If your plan requires you to perform at a high level in a demanding job through your mid-60s, you've built a financial plan on an assumption your body may not honor. The second thing that changes is your tolerance. And this one is harder to admit because it sounds like complaining. It's not complaining, it's a signal. The office politics that used to roll off you start landing differently. The pointless meeting that wastes 45 minutes of your afternoon, the micromanagement, the performance tracking software, the coaching sessions over a rolling stop in the company vehicle. These things didn't change. You changed. And the reason is not that you've become negative. The reason is that your brain has done a calculation, largely unconsciously, that your time is worth more than it used to be. At 32, you had decades of runway. At 62, you're thinking in years, finite years. And when something feels like a waste of finite years, you feel it in your chest in a way you simply didn't before. This is not irrational. This is accurate. The irritation is data. It's your psychology updating its model of the world. The problem is that most people feel this shift but don't connect it to anything actionable. They chalk it up to burnout, they take a vacation, they come back and nothing's changed because the variable that changed isn't the job, it's the internal clock ticking louder in the background. There's a concept in financial planning called sequence of returns risk. It means that the order in which your gains and losses happen matters as much as the total return. Take two investors who both average 7% annually over 20 years. One gets the bad years early and the good years late. The other gets the good years early and the bad years late. Their average returns are identical. Their retirement outcomes are completely different. The person who got bad returns early, right when they started drawing down, can end up broke, while the person who got lucky with timing is fine. Same strategy, same discipline, opposite results. Working in your 60s has the same hidden risk. The emotional and physical toll you're absorbing now is coming out of a reserve that cannot be refilled. You're drawing down on something that doesn't compound back. The third thing that changes is harder to talk about. You can start to feel trapped even when, on paper, you've done everything right. Maybe you've saved, maybe you've planned. But then there's health insurance. The coverage from your employer that cost you $180 a month would cost you $900 on the open market until Medicare kicks in at 65. So you do the math and you stay. Not because you want to, because leaving before 65 could cost you $8,000 to $10,000 a year in premiums alone. Maybe more, depending on where you live and what your health situation looks like. That's not a small number. That's the number that keeps people in jobs they've mentally already left. Here's the exercise that will tell you exactly where you stand. Imagine your manager calls you in tomorrow and tells you your position has been eliminated, effective immediately. You don't have to come back. How do you feel in that first 10 seconds? If the answer is relief, you're staying for the wrong reasons and your plan needs to be accelerated. If the answer is panic, that panic is a diagnostic. It's telling you exactly where the gap is between where you are and where your plan needs to get you. Most people never ask themselves this question directly. They live in a vague, ambient discomfort that never sharpens into clarity, because clarity would require action, and action feels harder than tolerating the current situation. The trap is comfortable enough to stay in, but uncomfortable enough to slowly drain you. Let's talk numbers, because this is where most people are deceiving themselves. The average American in their early 60s has about $185,000 saved in retirement accounts. Using the 4% rule, which is the standard framework designed to sustain withdrawals for 30 years without depleting principal, $185,000 generates $7,400 per year. That's $617 per month from your investments. Add Social Security, which for someone who earned a median wage and files at 62, comes out to roughly $1,300 to $1,500 per month. Before taxes, before healthcare premiums, before the $400 dental bill your insurance won't fully cover, before inflation erodes the purchasing power of that fixed income by 3% per year while your expenses do not cooperate. This is not a math problem that resolves itself through optimism. This is a structural gap. And the people who end up in the most difficult situations aren't the people who are reckless. They're the people who did most things right but miscalculated one or two variables. They bought a house thinking home equity was a retirement plan. They paused contributions during a rough stretch in their 40s. They took Social Security early because the monthly cash felt more real than the actuarial math. They didn't account for a spouse needing long-term care, which in 2025 costs between $50,000 and $80,000 per year, depending on whether it's home care or a facility. The fourth thing that changes is how the workplace itself feels, not dramatically, subtly. You start to notice that the people around you are at a completely different life stage. Your colleagues are talking about buying their first house. They're refinancing student loans. Retirement to them is an abstraction that exists somewhere past 2050. If you bring it up, they don't dismiss you. They just look at you the way you looked at 65-year-olds when you were 30, like it's a foreign country you've never been to, and you're suddenly the only person in the office who has visited. Technology cycles faster than it did 15 years ago. The tools change, the systems change, the metrics change. This isn't a complaint, it's a reality that requires ongoing effort just to stay current. And the cognitive bandwidth that effort requires is coming out of the same reserve that your job takes from and your health takes from. At 35, there was surplus capacity. At 63, surplus capacity is a thing you have to consciously protect. Here's what the data shows about workforce participation in your 60s. According to Bureau of Labor Statistics figures, about 57% of Americans between 60 and 64 are still in the labor force. By 65 to 69, that drops to roughly 32%. The most common reasons cited for continued work are insufficient retirement savings and healthcare coverage. Not purpose, not passion, financial necessity. That number, 57% still working between 60 and 64, should hit differently when you realize what it implies. More than half the people in that bracket didn't build an exit ramp that felt safe enough to use. The fifth thing that changes is the most important one, and the one people describe with the most difficulty. Time starts to feel categorically different. Not longer or shorter, different in texture. When you're 30, you think in decades. You have time to figure it out, time to course correct, time to recover from the mistakes. When you're in your early 60s, you start thinking in years, and every workday starts to feel like a transaction. You're trading something that feels increasingly finite for a paycheck. That transaction used to feel neutral. Now it doesn't. You're doing the arithmetic whether you mean to or not. This psychological shift is not a crisis, it's information. The question is whether you use it. Most people feel it and then suppress it because acting on it feels overwhelming. The gap between where they are and where they'd need to be feels too large to close, so they keep trading the years and hope something changes. Something rarely changes without a plan. Here's the framework for actually using this information. Step 1. Get completely honest about your real number. Not the number that sounds good, the number you actually need to sustain your specific lifestyle and your specific location with your specific health picture for a 25 to 30-year retirement. Take your current monthly expenses, add 15% for healthcare costs in retirement, add a 3% inflation adjustment per year. Run that out to age 90. Most people who do this exercise for the first time discover their number is significantly higher than what they've been targeting. That's not a reason to despair, it's a reason to stop flying blind. Step 2. Identify every anchor keeping you in the job. Health insurance is the most common. Calculate exactly what coverage would cost you on the open market between now and Medicare eligibility. In many cases, this is the single biggest financial obstacle to early exit. Once you know the number, you can build toward eliminating it. An extra $8,000 to $10,000 per year in investable assets held in a taxable brokerage account can generate that coverage cost through withdrawals without touching principal if the portfolio is large enough. The point is that the anchor has a price. Know the price, then build toward it deliberately instead of letting it hold you indefinitely. Step 3. Stress test your plan against the Social Security timeline. The Social Security Trust Fund is currently projected to face a funding shortfall in 2033. If Congress does not act, the law requires an automatic benefit reduction of approximately 23%. For a retired couple drawing combined benefits of $40,000 per year, that's a $9,200 annual cut. That's not a fringe scenario. That's the default outcome under current law unless something changes. If your retirement income plan relies heavily on full Social Security benefits, you need a buffer. And you need to know what the plan looks like if those benefits come in 23% lower than projected. Step 4. Separate your retirement assets from your net worth on paper. A house worth $600,000 is not retirement income. It's a place to sleep. Home equity only becomes liquid income if you sell, downsize, take a reverse mortgage, or borrow against it, each of which carries its own costs and trade-offs. What you need to look at is your liquid, invested, accessible capital, the money that can be converted to income without requiring you to move or borrow. That number is usually significantly smaller than what people call their net worth. Know the difference. That's the number your retirement actually runs on. Step 5. Build what you might call a 2-year bridge fund if you're within 5 years of your target exit date. 2 years of living expenses in a high-yield savings account or short-term treasuries, held completely separate from your investment portfolio. This does 2 things. It eliminates the panic factor that causes people to sell equities at the worst possible time during a market downturn, and it gives you a cushion that allows you to delay Social Security even by 2 or 3 years, which permanently increases your monthly benefit by 6 to 8% per year you delay past 62. Most people take Social Security early because they feel like they need the money immediately. A 2-year bridge fund removes that pressure and lets the math work in your favor. Working in your 60s is not a failure. That point is worth being clear on. For some people, it's a choice. For others, it's what the numbers require right now. But here's the thing that separates the people who move through this phase with clarity from the people who feel trapped by it. Clarity. Not a perfect plan, not a flawless savings rate, not a lucky market, just an accurate picture of where you are, what the gaps are, and what the next concrete step is to close them. The people who feel most stuck are almost always the people with the least specific picture of their actual situation. The vagueness itself is the trap. Once you replace vague anxiety with specific numbers, specific gaps, and specific actions, the situation becomes something you can navigate rather than something that's happening to you. The question isn't whether working in your 60s is hard. It is. The energy cost is real. The tolerance shift is real. The psychological weight of trading finite years for a paycheck is real. The question is whether you're using that reality as information to close the gap faster or whether you're absorbing it passively while the clock runs. The people who retire on their terms didn't get lucky. They got specific earlier than everyone else. You still have time to do the same thing.